So I recently completed a Dark Souls 1 replay because my first time through, I beat the game before completing all the content I wanted to see because I didn't realize beating the final boss would kick you right into NG+. I didn't want to experience certain things for the first time in NG+, so I waited until I had the itch to play it again and started a new character. My first time through Dark Souls 1 was only about 4 months ago, and it frankly wasn't positive. I thought the level design was very cool, but I found the combat very slow and clunky, and the bosses pretty much universally underwhelming. But to my surprise, I actually got the itch to play again pretty quickly. I wasn't sure I actually ever would. There's something, though, that's undeniably compelling about this game in my memory, despite my lackluster experience on my first playthrough. If I had to try to pin it down, I would say that the sound design and the level interconnectedness gave the game a very lived-in and ironically kind of cozy feeling, despite being a Souls game that is not cozy in the least. So anyway, on this playthrough, I knew I wanted to use my favorite weapon in the Souls games, the Moonlight Greatsword, and I know that drops from the tail of Seath, the scaleless, because I got it on my first playthrough, but I was using a strength build, so I never tried it. Seath is a pretty late game boss, so I essentially decided I wanted to rush through most of the game to get the weapon, upgrade it, and then see the parts of the game I missed my first time through, namely the DLC Artorias of the Abyss and the Painted World of Arianis. So for this intelligence run, I used the setup that Gino Machino used for his God Run 3. I guess I'll link that in the description. I started by basically leveling intelligence at every chance I got and, getting a few more runes by fighting the Taurus demon very early, things like that. And I used a glass cannon setup to do pretty much way too much damage to all the early and mid-game bosses because I wasn't interested in fighting them again. I just wanted to get the Moonlight Greatsword. So the early game build, I use a skip to get into the Undead Burg and get some sorcery, get access to sorceries pretty early from Griggs. And I use Heavy Soul Arrow and Honing Soul Mass, and the Bellowing Dragon Crest Ring to boost sorceries, and the Red Tearstone Ring, which is a low health setup. RTSR in Dark Souls 1 is insane compared to the other Souls games, or compared to the Red Feathered Branch Sword and Elden Ring. It boosts your damage, I think, by 50% when you're at, whatever the health threshold is, as opposed to 20% in the other games. And so this honestly made most of the bosses in the game a total breeze, and it was perfect for, a glass cannon magic setup, because with magic you're casting from far away, and you can fight these sort of, not later game, but, later early game bosses pretty much right away because you're doing a ton of damage. So anyway, once I rang both Bells of Awakening, I made my way to Anor Londo, where I fought truly what I think is the most overrated boss in the entire FromSoft catalog, Ornstein and Smough. And the reason I think that is because, frankly, I think the fight is not fun. I think the way that you get hits in and the way that you win is by relying on waiting for their AI to make mistakes or get caught on columns. I do not find that fun. I think if Ornstein and Smough is a good boss, then the gods can do it as a good boss, and I can't abide that. So anyway, once I, got through, I also, on my way there, picked up Big Hat Logan in Sen's Fortress, upgraded my spell options with Soul Spear, and eventually used the crystal versions of Soul Spear and Honing Soul Mass, so Crystal Soul Spear and Crystal Soul Mass, I think it's called, or Crystal Honing Soul Mass. I have to say, on the topic of Sen's Fortress, it reminds me, my second time through the game was a much more positive experience than my first time. Partly because intelligence builds in this game are definitely way overpowered, especially with the glass cannon RTSR setup. You can just sit back, blast even bosses away like they're nothing, let alone common enemies. So it was a lot easier to get through areas that gave me problems. But then a place like Sen's Fortress, which is filled with traps, and it was absolutely infuriating my first playthrough, it gave me no trouble this time. I actually kind of liked it. Because I, obviously had knowledge about what the traps were and how to get around them. I could say the same thing about, Blighttown, Anor Londo, the Duke's Archives. They're obviously a lot less grating once you know about the enemy placement and the right way to get through them. I would even say I liked them this time around. I understand way more after this replay why people love this game. I would actually count myself among those people now. Anyway, so once I picked up the Moonlight Greatsword, I took a bit of time to collect dragon scales and the upgrade material, of which there are a ton in Ash Lake, which is another area I missed on my first playthrough. And I upgraded the Moonlight Greatsword to +5, and then I entered the DLC. I will let the rest of the video play, including all the boss fights in the DLC, but I just want to say a bit about the DLC first. It is easily the best area in the game. The level design isn't quite as intricate as in the base game, which I was actually pretty glad about because I wasn't sure I wanted to devote a ton more time to exploring and figuring out all these secrets. I wanted to fight the bosses. And while I don't have any math on this or whatever, the ratio of like level traversing and exploration to boss fights in the DLC is very good. It feels totally stuffed with boss fights. Specifically, there are 4, and they're all at least decent. I actually think Artorias and Calamite are the 2 best bosses in the game. I might even consider them both S tier. Artorias, I definitely do. He in particular took the Dark Souls 1 combat system to completely new heights than I thought were possible. His timings of all of his moves really perfectly complemented the deliberately slower movement speed and high commitment attack combination that make Dark Souls 1 feel distinctive. I think he worked perfectly in this game. His fight feels like a high-speed chess match, and I was honestly sad when I beat him. I feel pretty similarly about Calamite. I think that the Sanctuary Guardian was very fast. It didn't feel right for this game. I felt similarly about Manus. It felt like the Flame Lurker from Demon Souls, which is a boss I absolutely hate. So I don't like them as much, but they're fine. I didn't have that much trouble with them because obviously I resorted to kind of a glass cannon magic build. So, you know, maybe I'll try them on NG Plus on my strength character and see how they fare in a pure melee approach, or maybe I'll just play the game again sometime with like a dex build or something. My overall impression of the game has shifted. I loved the painted world of Artorias in the DLC. I wasn't very impressed with the Moonlight Greatsword, and you'll see in the video it almost felt like a handicap to be using it. I'm not sure if the DLC bosses had high magic or slash resistance, or if its damage really is just this lackluster, but for every boss my winning fights were either just a pure glass cannon RTSR casting build, or used a combination of the Moonlight Greatsword and spell casting during longer punish windows. So anyway, in conclusion, I would say I'm a convert to Dark Souls 1. I frankly talked a lot of shit about it after my first playthrough, but this time around I had a really good time with it. I think I will play it again someday, which I couldn't have said 3 weeks ago. I still don't think it's a must play if you haven't played it, but you know, because the difficulty curve is still honestly steeper than any other From Software game I've played. But if you're a huge fan of Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, or Bloodborne, then you probably don't need convincing anyway to know it's worth giving it a shot. Just make sure you make it to the DLC on your first playthrough. Okay.